Welcome to APTN National News this Monday afternoon. I'm Sav Jonesa. We start with big news from across the pond. The Vatican says Pope Francis died earlier today at age 88. The pontiff will be remembered by some Canadian Catholics as a progressive leader. He is well known for his apology to residential school survivors in 2022, acknowledging the Church's heavy hand in the genocidal institutions.
During his papal visit to Canada in 2022, his apology on residential schools was a crucial step in moving the Church forward in its journey towards meaningful reconciliation.
There have been countless millions of Catholics and non-Catholics that have been inspired by his leadership in faith and other domains, and our prayers are with all Catholics.
The Vatican says the Pope's entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and focused on universal love, especially for the poorest and most marginalized. Pope Francis made history as the first Latin American pontiff from Argentina. He was known for his humble style and concern for the poor. He was often at odds with more conservative followers, allowing divorced Catholics to take part in communion service and allowing priests to bless same-sex couples. In 2022, the Pope visited Musqueam, where he apologized to generations of Indigenous people for the abuses they suffered in Canada's residential school system. The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations is among those extending their condolences on the passing of the Pope. Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak said in a statement that, quote, "While the Catholic Church has a legacy of harm against First Nations, we acknowledge the progress made in recent years, largely due to Pope Francis's efforts. He listened to us and heard us. He invited us to the Vatican and apologized. It was monumental in our history with the Catholic Church." Woodhouse-Nepenak says First Nations people still struggle with their relationship with the Catholic Church for good reason. The national chief says the 2022 apology was an important step forward in the healing journey of many First Nations individuals and communities. Woodhouse-Nepenak says, thanks to the work started by Pope Francis, we are now engaged in productive discussions regarding the repatriation of sacred First Nations cultural items from the Vatican. Since the last federal election, one region in Saskatchewan has changed its election boundaries. With just one riding covering most of northern Saskatchewan, candidates are pushing for meaningful change in a region calling for action. Rachel May looks at the candidates in Des Nethi, Mississippi, Churchill River.
The Assembly of First Nations says whoever wins Des Nethi, Mississippi, Churchill River could be decided by First Nation voters. Conservative Gary Vidal held Des Nethi, Mississippi, Churchill since 2019. In 2021, he crushed Liberal Buckley Belanger 10,000 votes to 5,500. However, Loon Lake, Pierceland, and Meadow Lake, where Vidal is from, are now a completely new riding, Battleford's Lloydminster Meadow Lake. So Vidal isn't running again. He says MPs should live in the riding they're elected in. Jim Lemeg from Clearwater River Dene Nation near La Loche is carrying the torch for the Conservatives this time around. Lemeg is a former RCMP officer. He was a Saskatchewan Party MLA from 2022 to 2024. He says more must be done to ensure Indigenous people in the North get what they need.
When we think about Jordan's principle, and right now what communities are experiencing are a backlog of paperwork that needs to be done. That's something that needs to be addressed. And that's a policy that I'm looking at and thinking that needs to change.
Lemeg says growing up in northern Saskatchewan and healing from intergenerational trauma drives his commitment to represent the riding.
And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, so I can give back to the people of northern Saskatchewan.
Buckley Belanger is the Liberal candidate. He was born in Isle-la-Crosse. He was the town's mayor between 1988 and 1994. He was the MLA for the Liberals and the NDP for the area between 1995 and 2021. He is Métis and says the Liberals have proven they're serious about helping all Canadians, including Indigenous people.
The Liberal Party has been trying to reconcile with a lot of the Indigenous communities across the country, and we've seen evidence of that reconciliation, but now we must move to the next level.
Belanger says the riding is vast and diverse, and he wants Indigenous voices to be heard on a larger scale.
This is our opportunity. We have such a lot of possibilities coming forward. I say to them that I have the experience, I have the passion, I have the drive to make sure we go and represent our people.
NDP candidate Doug Racine is Métis. He served in the military for 12 years before practicing law for 25. Racine says he can bring a fresh perspective to what Indigenous people truly need.
We have to give them the resources. The First Nations are ready to do the heavy lifting. They just need a little bit of help. And I think that's going to be by honoring the treaties and taking another look at the NRTA.
When discussing the main issues facing the riding, Racine said there's no time for inaction, and certain issues must be addressed immediately.
I think it has to be designated a crisis, the housing crisis, the homelessness crisis, the drug and alcohol crisis. It has to be designated that, and we need emergency funding up here ASAP.
All three candidates have identified housing insecurity and addictions as top priorities. Election Day in Canada is Monday, April 28th, 2025. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatchewan.
The election is coming up fast and advanced polling ends today. Is this the first election you're eligible to vote in? Has it been a long time since you last voted? It might feel overwhelming to decide which candidate to mark your ballot for, but the process of going to the polls and getting your voice heard should be simple. Here's how and what to expect when voting in this federal election so you feel confident heading to the polling station. This is a voter information card. You probably got one in the mail recently if you're registered and eligible to vote in the upcoming federal election. It tells you where you can cast your vote on election day or for advance polling based on your address. Bringing it with you will make it a lot easier to vote. If you aren't already registered to vote, no worries. You can still register online or when you go to vote in person. Check on the Elections Canada website to see where your polling station is by using your postal code if you don't already have a card. You can update your name or address online at your polling station or an Elections Canada office. You'll need proof of your current address or previous and new name to do that though. When it comes to actually voting, you need to be a Canadian citizen, at least 18 years old on the day of the election, and can prove your identity and address to be eligible. One piece of ID like a driver's license or any other ID issued by a Canadian government with your name, address, and a photo of your face works. It can even be expired as long as the information is current. Otherwise, bring two types of different IDs, both with your name and at least one with your address. Some quick suggestions are an Indian status card, Métis card, or voter information card. Here's a long list of all the accepted ID you can use to vote or register to vote. Just make sure they're the original copies. If you're unhoused or have no fixed address, you can still vote. Just bring one of those IDs with your name on it, like a birth certificate, along with a document called a letter of confirmation of residence as your address. You can get that at a social service establishment like a shelter or soup kitchen. They'll sign it and you'll use that postal code to find your polling station. If you can't do that, get someone to vouch for you at their polling station. A voucher must know you personally, be able to prove their identity and address with ID, and can't vouch for more than one person. Okay, so now we know what you need in order to vote, but how do we actually do it? You can vote early at any Elections Canada office until April 22nd. Advance voting days are from April 18th to the 21st, and the last day to vote, Election Day, is April 28th. You can find your voting locations and times on the voter information card or online using your address. You can also vote by mail with a special ballot where you write the name of the candidate you're voting for. The deadline to apply for voting by mail is April 22nd. To vote in person, you'll go to your assigned polling station and line up to vote. From personal experience, it's usually busiest before and after regular working hours. Speaking of, your work needs to ensure that all eligible voters have at least 3 consecutive hours in their day to vote. Talk with your boss if your work hours conflict with this. Once it's your turn in line, someone will direct you to your poll number section. This person has a bunch of names on a list and will check yours off and give you a ballot. Your ballot looks something like this, depending on how many candidates are running in your riding. You'll see their name and party affiliation. Put only an X or a check mark in the circle to the right for who has your vote. If you mark your ballot wrong, let the poll worker know and you'll get a new one. If you have a disability and need help voting, you can have someone accompany you, but they need to sign a declaration at the polling station. Now, keep in mind you're voting for a member of parliament to represent your riding. You won't see the party leader's name on your ballot unless you live in their specific riding as an MP candidate, so come prepared. Some people vote for a candidate based on their views or what party or leader they represent, or who the voter thinks has the best chance of winning to prevent a different candidate from coming out on top. The choice is ultimately yours. Whichever political party has the most MPs voted in across Canada, their leader will be asked to become the Prime Minister by the Governor General. Once your ballot is marked, you'll be asked to put it in the ballot box and can go on with your day or check out election coverage to see how people voted across the country. APTN National News will have election coverage from 9 p.m. Eastern to 8 p.m. Central on Election Day, so make sure to check it out. For more information on voting, check out elections.ca. We need to take a quick break, but first, our reporter Angel Moore is in New York. She'll tell us what she's up to this week.
I'm Angel Moore at the United Nations headquarters in New York for the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, where delegates from all over the world are gathering to discuss the implementation of UNDRIP. I'll bring you stories all week on the evening news at 5 p.m. Central and 6 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back. Despite Sharon Boccini now being deceased, her family is continuing the fight for her Indian status at Ontario's Court of Appeal. Their story to regain status began over 100 years ago in the Sandy Bay First Nation in Manitoba. Here's Annette Francis with that report.
Members of the Boccini family gathered outside Osgoode Hall following an appeal hearing for their mother's case. Steve Boccini says it's been an ongoing legal battle to regain his mother's status.
Well, 27 years, and I'm nervous, and I hope justice prevails here.
Boccini first applied for status for his mother in 1998. She was awarded status in 2007, but 2 years later, she was deregistered by the Registrar at Indigenous Affairs because her grandfather accepted Métis script. Sharon Boccini died waiting to be reinstated. Steve says his mom would be proud they've continued her fight.
My mom would be proud, yeah. So she would be proud, and she'd be excited, nervous, and happy that, you know, her story's getting out. Look, you know, this is what happened.
The cause for Sharon's loss of status began over 100 years ago when her grandfather, St. Pierre Cook, accepted Métis script. That invalidated any treaty rights he may have had. The family's lawyer is Lucas Lung. He told the court on Tuesday that there is evidence Cook was underage at the time, and he could not legally accept script. Lung also pointed out the script was signed in 1888 by a known fraudster at the time, an individual named William Sifton. Last July, the family won their case at the Ontario Court of Appeal, but it was short-lived as the Attorney General of Canada appealed that judge's decision. Lung is feeling positive about the appeal hearing.
I mean, I feel good. We had a good hearing today. We had a very, very active panel. All three justices had a lot of questions for both sides. And this is a case that raises a lot of issues, and it raises a lot of important issues.
Steve Boccini is also hopeful of a positive outcome.
They're fighting us so because this is going to involve a lot of families. A lot of families, this will involve probably thousands of people. And I think that's why they're fighting us, tooth and nail. I mean, this is our third time. We won once, then a second time, and now here we are back in court again for the third time in 27 years.
According to Lung, a decision could take months. Indigenous Services Canada declined to comment. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Toronto.
Thanks, Annette. We now want to tell you about last week's web poll results. We asked how much influence will the federal leaders debate have on your vote. 55% said none at all, 27% voted some influence, 15% voted a lot of influence, and 3% are not planning to vote. Our second question was, do you support the federal Conservatives' plan to put violent offenders behind bars indefinitely? The numbers were close here. 44% voted no and 40% voted yes, though 16% were unsure. And our last question was, have you noticed a difference in prices since the carbon tax was removed? It was an evenly split decision, with 50% voting no and 50% voting yes. Thanks to all those who took the time to vote. Check out aptnnews.ca for our next set of web poll questions. If you love listening to podcasts or want deeper insight into current Indigenous issues while on the go, do we have the thing just for you? The APTN News in Focus podcast with Sierra Beddens touches on a wide variety of topics impacting our community. We'll hear more about it from Sierra after the break. Ooh, it is 6 in Charlottetown and Halifax, a little bit of sun as well. It's 0 in Kuujjuaq, 1 and some rain in Cartwright. It's 6 and cloudy in Quebec, 8 in Montreal. It's 9 and sunny in London, 7 and sunny in Sault Ste. Marie. Sudbury is 3 in sun and some sun and cloud, and 3 in Big Trout Lake. Churchill is -13 with a little bit of cloud, and it's 1 and cloudy in Norway House. Winnipeg is a sunny 7 and 3 in Gimli. Regina is cloudy and 8 and 3 and lots of sun in North Battleford. Stony Rapids is -9 but lots of sun, and sunny and some cloud, -3 in La Ronge. Lots of rain in northern Alberta. It's 11 in Fort McMurray and 11 in High Level. Some rain in southern Alberta, 5 in Calgary, 4 in Red Deer. It's 11 and cloud in Vancouver, 9 in Quesnel. Fort Nelson is rainy and 12, 11 in sun in Prince George. Mayo is 8 and 6 in Watson Lake. -5 in Norman Wells and 0 in Yellowknife. Sax Harbor is -9 and -10 in Tuktoyaktuk. Chesterfield is -8 and some cloud, -9 in Baker Lake. Iqaluit is 0 and -8 in Resolute. Every Thursday, our reporter Sierra Beddens hosts the weekly podcast, APTN News in Focus, bringing back our former TV show of the same name in a new format. She takes a deeper look into the headlines and what's making news from coast to coast to coast. This week, Sierra spoke with Jeff Ward, the founder and CEO of Anamiki Indigenous Technology, to put Indigenous data sovereignty in focus. Take a listen.
And so when we're thinking about Indigenous data sovereignty principles, how do these principles contrast with how bigger tech companies are viewing, storing, and using data?
Well, big companies see data as the new oil. I think proudly look at data as the new oil, which just further really centers that extractive colonial worldview of data as something to be extracted from, and has value, and how can we turn that into dollars? And when we think about data from an Indigenous perspective, we think about those collective rights, and that's that word C in the CARE principles. That's for collective benefit, and so that's not something to be extracted from data, to be extracted from community.
And Sierra is in studio with us now to share more. Thanks for joining us, Sierra. So the topic of this week's episode is Indigenous data sovereignty. Can you tell us more about what that means?
Yeah, so the concept of Indigenous data sovereignty has been around for a while. You know, in the 90s, we had the principles of OCAP that were established. I guess more recent years, we have the CARE principles of Indigenous data governance. But basically, in simple terms, it's the rights of Indigenous peoples and communities to control, manage, and access their own data. So it's really about, you know, having self-determination over data and, you know, how it's stored, how it's managed, who has access to it. And so when we talk about data, we're talking about, you know, stories, histories, you know, all the information that really makes us who we are and defines, you know, where we come from. So that concept of Indigenous data sovereignty is about, you know, it's important to, you know, ethically store and manage that data.
I mean, that sounds like something that would be important for anybody, but especially our communities. Why is Indigenous data sovereignty so important to understand in the age of big tech?
Yeah, so something I found really interesting in this conversation that we had for In Focus with Jeff Ward, who's the CEO of Animikie Indigenous Technology, was this idea of data as a resource. So something kind of interesting he said was this idea of data is the new oil. And so when we think about that, we think about, you know, these big tech companies wanting to capitalize on data and sort of use that resource to their advantage. But the risk with that is that, you know, there's potential to harm Indigenous communities and the data that belongs to them. And so this idea of Indigenous data sovereignty is really affirming this idea that Indigenous peoples should be able to control, govern, and manage their own data in ways that, you know, are of collective benefit rather than, you know, a way that a big tech company might see data where it's, you know, just to capitalize it or make a profit off of it.
Wow. How is Indigenous data sovereignty being put into practice by Indigenous communities and tech communities? Or tech companies, I should say.
Yeah, so Animikie, which is Jeff Ward, our guest, Indigenous tech company, has a platform called Niwen. So basically what it is it's a data platform that they developed that allows the Indigenous communities and organizations that they work with to basically exercise Indigenous data sovereignty. So it's, you know, the platform itself gives them the ability to control how, you know, their data is managed, who has access to it, where it's stored, what it's used for. So, you know, contrasting that with, you know, a big tech model where, you know, if that data is given to a big tech company, it's kind of unknown how that data might be used and, you know, whether there could be a potential for harm. And, you know, the stuff with the rise of AI, when tech companies are really looking to use and profit off that data, I think it's really important to understand and, you know more about these platforms like Niwen that are growing, that are, you know, allowing the concept of Indigenous data sovereignty to be put in practice.
How can people tune into the In Focus podcast?
Yeah, so you can visit aptnnews.ca/podcast to tune in, or you could just tune in on your favorite player, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, whatever you usually use to tune into podcasts.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, I'm definitely going to listen to that later today. Thank you so much for joining us, Sierra.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. That brings us to the end of our show this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the stories our reporters brought to you today. I'll see you this evening at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central for more news. But until then, have a great day and take care.